I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna Ellis on Jenna Ellis Tonight. We have a great show for you tonight. It was not a slow news weekend, was it? Joe Biden is out of the race. We're going to be dissecting every bit of that, the hows, the whys, and what comes next with Democratic strategist Robin Byro and former CIA Chief of Station Scott Eulinger. We're going to be talking about Kamala Harris's eloquence, her ability to publicly speak like nobody else. And we're going to be talking quite a bit about the abysmal failures of the United States Secret Service that almost got Donald Trump killed and did see a fire chief murdered in front of his family. It was absolutely horrific. The Secret Service director was on Capitol Hill earlier today, and it did not go well for her. All that and more on Jenna Ellis Tonight.
Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna.
Welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna, and I wish I could tell you guys it was a slow news weekend as we ease into the week on this Monday evening, but it was not. Joe Biden is out of the presidential race. His exit came in the form of a very general letter that has some people asking questions. Watch this.
Fox News alert, President Joe Biden's announcing he's dropping out of the race. God must have spoken, because he said the only thing that was going to make him bow out was the great Almighty. How did Joe Biden tell the world he wasn't running for re-election? He wrote us a letter. He said, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. The guy who got more votes than anybody in American history is leaving after one term. Why is it in the best interest of your country for you to leave, Joe? Well, we know the answer, but why don't you tell us? Is it because the last 4 years have been a disaster? Is it because you're mentally unfit? Or is it because you were pushed out in a bloodless coup? I want to hear him say it. Because if later in the week he says, I'm not running because I can't win, that's not how we do things. Democrats don't get to push candidates through the primary. Millions of Americans vote for them. And if it doesn't look like they can win, rich guys at the convention pick somebody else? That's not what we do in the United States. The entire Biden presidency was a cover-up that got exposed on debate night. And now they want to pick another puppet? That's why we have primaries. This should have all been hashed out in a primary. But they rigged it, so no one could expose Joe. And then they kicked RFK Jr. out of the Democratic Party, so he couldn't wind up with the second most delegates. But this isn't close to over. Biden endorsed Kamala Harris on his way out. Then Hillary endorsed Kamala Harris, obviously, because she's a woman. But Barack didn't.
So much to unpack there. And here to do it with me are two of my good friends, Democratic strategist and former Obama staffer Robin Byro, and retired United States Naval officer and CIA station chief, Scott Eulinger. Robin, Scott, great to see you guys. So, Robin, let's start with you because you know these people. You've worked with these people. I look at this and I'm shocked that the sitting president of the United States of America exits the presidential race. He's his party's nominee. He has the delegates. It was going to be a coronation at the convention, and he now drops out. And we're told that his staff was given 1 minute notice. The decision was made at 1:45 p.m. Eastern. His staff found out and posted it up on X at 1:46 p.m. We haven't seen the president. We have no proof of life for the president. We haven't seen a video of the president walking around his Delaware home or on the beach. This begs a million questions. What are you hearing from people inside the party, Robin?
From Democrat insiders, they're just grateful. They're grateful that Joe is stepping aside. We all know that the donations were down. We had a goal of $50 million for the month of July, and we didn't even get half that. So, once the money dries up, campaigns are dead. So he knew that he was a dead man walking, and there was no way he was going to get reelected. The weird fact of the matter is, though, that Kamala Harris is only polling about a point or two better than he was. So it's strange.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Look, Scott, one of the things that people are concerned by is the fact that we haven't seen Biden. Normally, in a situation like this, you would, something that's significant, the resignation from the race by the sitting president, you would see some kind of visual evidence that he made that decision, that he wrote that letter, that he signed that letter. This is bothering me. Bill Ackman, the billionaire investor, put up a post on X asking all of these questions. Let's take a look at what Bill Ackman said on X. Do we have that post, guys? Yeah, let's take a look at this. I'm going to have the producers put up this graphic. There it is. So Bill Ackman, billionaire investor, is a newly, I would say, a new political analyst. He's been far more vocal about politics lately. Wrote, "One would think that a letter to the American people from the president announcing his decision to step aside would not be signed using a digital signature and would be accompanied by a photo op and a scheduled conference in the morning that followed." I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Ackman went on to say, "Instead, we have a digitally signed letter released on the president's X account, an account we know is run by a staffer. No photo, no live schedule addressed to the American people. If I were China, I'd invade Taiwan tomorrow." Now, Scott, you and I have spoken about this for years on air. You were a naval officer. You operated in that region, the Straits of Taiwan, the South China Sea. Is Ackman off base here?
Well, actually, I think, like, from a national security standpoint, I actually think we're in a pretty good position, only because, at least as of right this minute, I think it's apparent. The Democratic panic is one example of this. It's apparent that the Republicans
Scott's having some technical difficulty.
Elected, withstanding. How about now, John?
Scott, can you go back we lost you for a minute. Can you go back about 30 seconds? Right after you said we're in a pretty good place from a national security standpoint. Can you pick up there?
Right. I think we're in a pretty good place from a national security standpoint, because the same way that the stock market seems to be pricing in a Trump victory, I think that the world is starting to price in a Trump victory. Of course, that's shenanigans, election shenanigans notwithstanding. But I think that the world's bad actors are looking at this right now. And although, of course, it's a disaster as far as U.S. perception goes, the powers that be believe that Trump will be victorious. And that is the one thing that is holding them back from going absolutely hog wild across the world.
Scott, would you equate this to the Iranian hostages being released when it was evident that Ronald Reagan was going to ascend to the presidency, when the mullahs knew we could mess around with Carter, but we can't mess around with this guy?
Yeah, I think it is the same type of thing. And I was an intel officer in Eastern Europe, and as a child, I remember, although maybe some viewers do not, all of the rigmarole surrounding the Soviet Union's Andropov and Chernenko. Both of them were very old people who only were about a year in power, and half the time in power they were dead. And the Soviet Union was trying to prop up this image that they were in good health and that they were around. And meanwhile, there was a media black hole. Well, welcome to the Soviet Union, because what we're seeing now is unprecedented. It's more like what you see happen in a country like North Korea.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. You know, Robin, one thing we know for sure, and I don't think there's any dispute about this, Barack Obama, your old boss, still runs the Democratic Party. His finger is on the scale heavily. He's behind this, but he didn't endorse Kamala Harris. Why?
So I was really surprised about that. So I inquired, and basically I was ever so gracefully reminded by him that he didn't endorse Joe Biden during the primary, his own vice president. And he considers this to be a primary process, he said, and that this will play out at the convention. And really, he said he just wants to play it cool. So, you know,
Robin,
I guess I get it.
But this means that Obama's got his finger on the scale. He doesn't want Kamala to be the nominee because he knows she'll be a disaster. And to me, this says Obama wants an open convention, and Obama and Kamala nowhere has this locked up.
No, he says he wants an open convention. Now, my issue with that is that we've done that 4 times before. There's historic precedent for that, and we have lost all 4 of those by a mile, which is why I said the only way that we even stand a fighting chance is to make her president right now. If he's unfit to serve for re-election, then, you know, why not just go ahead and have her be president now, you know, show that she can lead in a time of crisis, and then we could at least maybe get a little bit of experience points and a small smidgen of the incumbency that would favor us. Because right now, I'll tell you, the Vegas betting odds show her only a 40% chance of winning, and I'd say that's generous.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty optimistic and generous by Vegas. You know, Scott, tap on your experience at the agency, because you make a good point, right? What we're seeing now in this country with regards to the media transparency from this White House, it is third world or Iron Curtain type stuff. I mean, that's indisputable. Anybody paying attention can see that. Scott, in about the last minute and a half that we have, what do you make of the fact that Biden makes this significant decision, but we haven't seen or heard a word from this guy?
I agree with Ackman's, which I just read that. I agree with Bill Ackman's assessment. This is all highly suspicious. An e-signature, not White House stationery, and no press conference. These, oh, and by the way, the other notable thing, the president's entire schedule has been cleared for 1 week. Who does that?
Yeah, that's odd.
That's crazy. Yeah, so all of those things are huge questions. And I think that Biden himself right now does not exactly know what's going on, and he doesn't know he's dropped out.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, Robin, in the last 30 seconds, what do you make of this? No public appearances, and no indication of when there will be one.
That's a huge problem. And look, I know that he's got COVID, but all that we've seen are the news cameras circling around his home in Delaware. It's bizarre, right? We need to see Joe Biden. You know, Americans would at least like to know that our president is okay health-wise.
Well, that we have a functioning president. I mean, right now we seem like a rudderless and without any leadership. And I just don't understand. Well, we know why, but I can't believe that the media doesn't care, that they'll remain complicit and assist in the cover-up. All right, we've got a lot more with Robin and Scott. When we come back, we're gonna take a look at what some members of Congress think about potential President Kamala Harris. Stick around, we'll be right back.
Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. You served with Kamala Harris. You know her from the campaign trail. Do you support her as the nominee?
Yes, I do. And I did want to say something today first about President Biden. He took the honorable path. He has always led with conviction, with integrity, and he did it today. It's not an easy thing, and he did the right thing for our country, and I'm very excited about Kamala Harris as our candidate.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I'm John Cardillo in for Jenna. Back with me, Democratic strategist Robin Byro and former CIA officer Scott Eulinger. Robin, Amy Klobuchar is absolutely giddy. I mean, she was exasperated. She was out of breath. I think somebody wants to be a vice president.
I could absolutely see that, and she was honestly my first choice for president back when we ran the last time. Look, I think that having two females at the top of the ticket might be a mistake. I'm not sure that America is ready for that. But I've seen Tammy Baldwin's name being floated around. I've seen some female military generals' names being thrown around. So, I don't think it's a coincidence.
Scott, if you had to put money on it today, who do you think Kamala would pick as the VP? I know that's a broad, open question. I'm putting you on the spot, but we've been analyzing politics on air, you and I, for 7-8 years. And I always trust your analyses. What are you saying?
I think that Josh Shapiro may be the type of candidate that she would want. I mean, obviously, Pennsylvania is a battleground where I live, and I think his name has been touted quite a lot. So I think that he is one of the go-tos, but that is presuming that she even obtains the nomination.
Yeah, I've been hearing his name quite a bit too, as definitely top three. Robin, I want to go back to something you just touched on. You talked about Senator Tammy Baldwin. And the reason there's speculation about Baldwin is there's an FEC filing for a Harris-Baldwin committee. Now, we saw this a few weeks back with Trump's VP pick. We saw a committee for General Mike Flynn. We saw a committee for Tim Scott, for Marco Rubio. Well, they all turned out to be trolling to throw people off. He ultimately went, of course, with J.D. Vance from Ohio. But the timing of this one seems a little bit more peculiar and a little bit more grave, right? We don't even know if Biden's health has him in a place where he's functional. What do you make of that Harris-Baldwin filing with the FEC?
Tammy Baldwin made a full-throated endorsement early on of Kamala Harris yesterday, and I got the indication from just my gut instinct that she's a contender for VP, but like I said, I've already seen females saying that they're not ready for a female president. But if I have females saying that, because we know from exit polling for 2016, females voted against Hillary Clinton. Females vote against other females. It happens. So I think if we have two females at the top of the ticket, I don't know if it's a good sign for Democrats.
Look, I tend to agree with you. I think there's a lot of traditionalism still in the United States. And Scott, you live in a rural area of Pennsylvania that's pretty representative. If I recall correctly from your congressional race about 6 or so years ago, the area in which you live, the district in which you were running, is pretty representative of America on the whole. What's the general sentiment out there in your neck of the woods in Pennsylvania, such a critical and pivotal state, with Biden exiting the race and Kamala as the potential nominee?
I think that what I've seen is I've seen an increased amount. I see an increased amount of Trump lawn signs. I see an increased number of enthusiastic people for Trump. So I believe that the Republicans are gaining the edge in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure how significant that is, but the abysmal polling numbers of Kamala Harris, the fact that I don't even think she was able to get her own state when she was running, I think bodes well for the Republicans in Pennsylvania. And that's why I think maybe she would go with someone like Shapiro, the governor, in an attempt to try to boost flagging numbers in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, Robin, Shapiro's been doing quite a bit of media lately. He's reinventing himself as somewhat of a moderate, right? He's coming back toward the center. He's moving away from the far left. As a VP, he would be formidable, but is it possible that Obama likes him for top of the ticket, and that's why Obama wants to march everybody to an open convention?
Oh, it's going to be the worst idea ever to go to an open convention or a brokered convention, if you will. Just a terrible strategy. It would be so divisive for the Democratic Party, and we've just been through total chaos. We're still in the midst of it all. So I think that strategically speaking, the best bet is one of these three male governors, Shapiro, Beshear in Kentucky, or Cooper in North Carolina. Those are all safe bets. Mark Kelly, I just want to point out, the governor of, if he were to be the vice presidential pick, the governor of Arizona, Katie Hobbs, would just slot in a replacement for him in the Senate. And that seat is not up, John, until 2029. So that's a good safe bet also.
Yeah, Mark Kelly, of course, is the husband of Representative Gabby Giffords, who was shot. He's an astronaut. He's a current senator from Arizona, but he's a real big anti-Second Amendment guy. And it seems like more and more Americans, that's becoming a hot button issue with more and more Americans. I think, Scott, if I'm not incorrect, I think Pennsylvania has more deer hunters than any other state in America, or it's a real close second. And I remember back when you were running, even the Democrats, Scott, in Pennsylvania were touting their A ratings by the NRA at that time. So how does a Mark Kelly play in the Midwestern states, in Pennsylvania, in the Rust Belt?
Right. I think Mark Kelly is going to have a problem in any state with a large amount of hunters. I think Pennsylvania has about 300,000 hunters. But even more interesting is I graduated from the United States Merchant Marine Academy in 1986. Kelly is my classmate. Now, my school, we only graduated 220 a year. So I know Mark Kelly pretty well, but I went to a very small school. So it's just kind of ironic that that his name is being considered, and he is a Kings Pointer like myself.
How was he? How was he at Kings Point? Was he a far left guy
Actually,
like today? Or?
Actually, frankly, he was a very impressive student. He was beyond. You cannot criticize anything he did at the academy itself. He had a wonderful record. Unfortunately, myself and many conservatives in my class now regard him as a Judas who has taken 30 pieces of silver because he has basically aligned himself with a party that is in disagreement with everything he believed in when he was 21 years old.
That's an interesting take. Robin, in the last about a minute and a half we have left, if they go to an open convention, a brokered convention, call it what you will, is it simply a dog and pony show? And is Obama going to ultimately pick who the nominee is? It sure seems like Obama is running this entire game. Last minute to you, Robin.
No, that's a fair assessment. He still pretty much calls the shots. I just want to say that in South Carolina, their delegates vote tomorrow. So I don't know about how it is for the rest of the states, but I think that's what the timing was about with Joe Biden stepping down yesterday, frankly. They're already voting.
Yeah. I mean, that was to me was just very peculiar timing with another primary, with the convention, only a few weeks away. This entire thing is a mess, unprecedented. I mean, America's never seen anything. I mean, we've never seen anything like this, and no one knows how it's going to shake out. I mean, we're watching this, and we're watching what's essentially a train wreck in one of our two political parties. We love it on the right, but I know my friends like Robin on the other side are not loving this. More when we come back. Isn't Kamala eloquent? You have no idea. Be right back. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. John Cardillo here in for Jenna. And say what you want about Kamala Harris. Like, she's unburdened by what might have been. I mean, this woman is eloquent, if she's nothing else, right? Take a look at this.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be unburdened by what has been.
There are those who are unable to see what can be, but there are many more who are able to see what can be unburdened by what has been.
Remember Venn diagrams, those three circles? Right. And then let's just see where they overlap. You will not be surprised because I have constructed a Venn diagram on this. Remember those three circles, how they overlap? I love Venn diagrams. So I just do. Whenever you're dealing with conflict, pull out a Venn diagram, right? And so, the three circles. Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit.
Wow. Back with me, Democratic strategist Robin Byro and former CIA intelligence officer Scott Ulinger. Scott, you've operated around the world with the Navy, with CIA. But have you ever had such hard-hitting analysis on Ukraine and Russia as you just listened to Kamala Harris?
Probably not. Statements are so empty and vapid that I think if you looked up vapid in the American Heritage Dictionary, you would see her picture. I mean, certainly the bad actors of the world look at something like this and just are rubbing their hands with glee at even the potential that such an empty-headed ignoramus could become president of the United States.
Robin, are you unburdened? Are you unburdened, Robin? How do you feel after listening to that?
I honestly can't make sense of that. I was trying my best to understand what that meant, and I'm sorry, I just can't. But look, she's a former prosecutor, and she's going to be facing a skilled defendant. So this is going to be one spicy race, make no mistake.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, though, because one of the things the mainstream media glosses over all the time, the corporate media, is the fact that when Kamala Harris was the district attorney of San Francisco, she had a lab tech who was addicted to opioids. Kamala Harris knew this. She knew that the cases were tainted, yet she kept prosecuting. Most of the people wrongfully prosecuted, wrongfully convicted were Black men. She was admonished, I mean, excoriated by a judge. The cases were overturned. We've heard none of that, Scott, none of that. We've got about a minute and a half left. I mean, shouldn't that be a top news item?
Obviously, it should be. And I also recall reading that that in her race to be attorney general, she squeaked by, barely getting elected to that position at a time when the governor won by 10 points or something like that. So, you know, the woman has constantly eked out a political life because people sense the fakery and people see that she's a fake. And she has not been a popular candidate for any elected office.
But Robin, in the last 30 seconds, 45 seconds we have, why has this woman been able to fail upwards the vice presidency of the United States?
Oh, no, I absolutely have no idea. She, you know, her campaign for president had a lot of traction at first, but it fell to pieces. I'm sure you both remember. It just fell absolutely off the rails the last few weeks of her campaign. She didn't get to score one delegate, if I recall.
Well, because of that,
That's right.
Because of that communication style. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Venn diagram, when he's in trouble, Venn diagram. Maybe we could use a Venn diagram to explain what's unburdened and what can be. But really, this is troubling. I mean, 330 million, 350 million people in this nation, whatever the current count is. She's the best. She's the best the Democrats can come up with. And the Democrats have more problems on their hands. The Secret Service director testified before Congress today. Didn't go so well for her. We'll get into that when we come back.
Well, the failures are just absolutely outrageous and incredible. You know, first you start asking the question, is this a failure of resources? Is this a failure of protocols or a failure of management? It appears that now we know that it's all three, that people on the ground at Trump's campaign who were involved with security had asked for additional resources. They had identified that there were gaps. Now, what's interesting is when we had our briefing and the Secret Service gave us their own timeline admits that 9 minutes before Donald Trump took the stage, that they were aware of a particular threat and still let Donald Trump take the stage. And then, as we also know from their own timeline, they didn't take a shot to take out the shooter until Donald Trump himself was shot. And what you see from this is that, you know, obviously, thank God Donald Trump is alive. And as he's alive, we look at this as incompetence. But if he had been killed, they would be culpable. Every aspect of their failure leads right to giving an opportunity to shoot Donald Trump. And that is going to be the major issue. How did this happen? And of course, she needs to be fired. President Biden should fire her. She's clearly not going to resign. But her failures are incredibly well known throughout the organization. And even as we look at that day, they were very, very basic failures.
And that was Representative Mike Turner, a Republican from Ohio, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, talking about the Secret Service's failures, especially the failures of their director, Kimberly Cheatle. I'm John Cardillo, in for Jenna Ellis. Back with me, Democratic strategist Robin Byro, and retired CIA Chief of Station Scott Eulinger. Scott, when I was with NYPD, I worked in a unit that worked alongside the Secret Service whenever there was a president coming to New York City or another high-level protectee. And I watched how they operate, what they do. I watched the United States Secret Service hit with one of their big Suburbans, run over a bike messenger, knocked that guy right off his bike, threw him in the bike in the back, and brought them down to 26 Federal Plaza. Because when the president is moving, or for a short amount of time before and after they move, Robin, you know this, Scott, I'm sure you know this as well, there's a vehicular and pedestrian freeze for a certain zone. And this bike messenger just didn't want to be late. He broke that freeze. They hit him with the Suburban. So it is preposterous to any of us, Scott, who've ever worked in law enforcement or in the military, the intelligence community, that the actions of the Secret Service that day are explicable or justifiable in any way, shape, or form. It was a breakdown, every link of the chain snap, not just the critical points. And I believe the Intelligence Committee chair is 100% right. People should be fired immediately. They shouldn't be given the opportunity to resign. But what do you make of this, Scott? Because more and more, I'm not conspiratorial, but more and more, I'm demanding the answer to the question of who didn't give the order to secure the building? Who did not give the snipers the green light to engage? You ran operations around the world, Scott. What do you make of this?
Right. I, of course, agree with you, John, and everything the senator said. This is an absolute unmitigated disaster. But I also think that this is sort of the canary in the coal mine for the idea of DEI in the government in general. Diversity and inclusion has eviscerated the capability of the intelligence community and the law enforcement community. I cannot emphasize this enough. I've been in Washington speaking with some high-ranking intel officials recently, and this is a trend that has absolutely gone out of control during the Biden administration. There are people in positions all over, and we can see it ourselves, that simply do not have the ability to do the job. And they were promoted because they look good on paper, but they have no practical experience. The female head of the Secret Service is a perfect example. She was apparently liked by Jill Biden and was elevated to a position way above her competence. So this is a disaster for the government in general.
Yeah, she spent 27 years with the Secret. There was some narrative going out there that she had worked for PepsiCo, and she did. But I do want to clarify that. She spent 27 years with the Secret Service, retired, then took the global security director job at PepsiCo. Now, that's pretty common. But here's what bothers me about her, Robin. Her last gig at Secret Service before retirement, she was the assistant director and essentially the executive officer, the number 2, of the unit responsible for protective detail training. This woman not only knew exactly what to do and what not to do, she wrote some of those protocols. She managed those protocols. I mean, to me, it is just absolutely mind-blowing. And now the other thing we know, Robin, and I got this source information about 4 days before whistleblowers came forward, and Senator Tom Cotton publicized that he had put up the information that there were whistleblowers in Secret Service. Well, somebody inside Homeland Security had sent me a text saying that one of the main problems at Secret Service is short staffing. Now, they've always had very horrible retention rates because it's a tough job, a lot of travel, I get that. But the troubling part of their text was what we now know from Senator Cotton, was that they were flying in agents from other Homeland Security entities, Homeland Security investigations, ICE. These people do not have the same training as the United States Secret Service on protective details. So we had agents, yes, federal law enforcement officers, 1811s, federal investigators, well-trained people, but not trained for that. And people say, well, law enforcement officers. No, if I need open heart surgery, I'm not going to an orthopedic surgeon. There are very different disciplines with different training. You were around presidents, Robin. You worked on campaigns. Have you ever seen that shoddy a response?
No, it was frankly embarrassing when I saw them standing around that big Suburban, just like you said, and not knowing what to do. They were fumbling around their pockets. They were looking around at the other agents, just kind of looking like, what do we do now? I mean, and the part that I think was most egregious was Kimberly Cheatle saying in the testimony that they didn't go on the rooftop because it was pitched. And that was the sorriest excuse I've ever heard.
It was so bad. You know, Scott, I relentlessly mocked her on social media, and I had found an image of Special Forces snipers on a mountain, and it was essentially like a 75% degree grade, and they were able to set up there, provide overwatch and sniping capabilities. I mean, when they say the cover-up is worse than the crime, the Secret Service's crisis comms are far worse than their abysmal failures that day. I've never seen anything like this, Scott. You worked in the IC. I mean, this comms failure is just astonishing to me.
It really is. It's astonishing on so many levels. It was interesting that you had a more vigorous response to the accusation that there were unqualified females. There was a more vigorous response to that allegation than there was to the sheer incompetence that was displayed in front of the world. I mean, this is an absolutely broken organization, much like the FBI and actually much like the CIA. These organizations are absolutely broken from a bureaucratic standpoint, and it's clear that should Trump win, there is going to have to be some absolutely fundamental restructuring with the removal of scores of senior-ranking people.
You know, Robin, in the last couple of minutes we have left, Scott raises an interesting point. The entire country now seems to be opposed to DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, because they know it's breeding poor, if not a complete poor performance, if not a complete absence of performance. Do you think the Democratic Party is going to start to pivot on that issue and move away from DEI? Because it sure seems that the vast majority of Americans have.
We're listening to our Republican peers, and honestly, some of what we're hearing makes sense. Merit-based. I think we're heeding the call to a merit-based approach to things like this now, not just DEI. It's got to be merit-based, and the people that are actually qualified for these positions. It's just common sense. Common sense should not be appropriated by one party or the other. It's just common sense.
Yeah, you know, I agree. And people were slamming me saying, oh, you're being misogynistic. Women can do the job. Sure. I worked with some really proficient women in law enforcement. But when your protectee is 6'2", 6'3", and you're 5'5", 5'6", no, you cannot do that job. That was our complaint. You have to be at least as tall as your protectee, if not taller, to let's call it what it is. To take the bullet for them. When they're a foot taller than you, you can't do that. And that was our only point. And I think that's where we need to stop with this DEI nonsense and realize, no, not everyone can do every job. You can want to do that job, but maybe there are certain jobs you can't do. When we come back, the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, was on Capitol Hill earlier today. You're going to see what she said, and it did not go over well with members of Congress. Stick around. And welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. John Cardillo here in for Jenna. The head of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, was in the hot seat on Capitol Hill today, and members of Congress were not having her inability or her unwillingness to answer questions. Watch this.
Before the shooting started, if you could turn up the volume.
Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
Right on the roof.
It's much tougher than it happens.
You went right on the roof again.
Up here. Ma'am, that doesn't look like suspicious behavior. That looks like threatening behavior to me. And the rally wasn't paused at that point either, correct?
I can tell you, as I stated earlier, sir, that the moment that the shift surrounding the president were aware of an actual threat.
That's a threat right there. The guy's on the roof and everybody's yelling at him.
Yes.
And directing the officer's attention to him. The rally was not paused at that point, correct?
We are currently still combing through communications and when communications were passed.
Well, I can point you to this communication. It's 2 minutes before the shots started ringing out. Director Cheatle, yes or no? Was there ever a moment where the Secret Service actually considered pausing the rally?
the Secret Service would have paused the rally had they known or been
So the
told
answer is
there
no.
was an actual threat.
The answer is no. Correct?
I can speak to you in generalities.
No, I don't want generalities. I want
all
specifics.
Of the communications.
The answer is no. You did not consider pausing the rally, correct?
The people that are in charge of protecting the president on that day would never bring the former president out if there was a threat that had been identified.
Well, they did, because we've now identified 3 points in the 20 minutes before the shooting that the threat emerged.
And that was Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, a Democrat from Illinois, a Democrat putting the Secret Service director on the hot seat. Back with me, Democratic strategist Robin Byro and former CIA station chief Scott Eulinger. Robin, I got to go to you first. I never thought I'd see a Democrat hitting a Biden appointee that way, especially a friend of the First Lady. There is universal consensus from members of Congress, from the law enforcement community, that the response was unacceptable and abysmal. But a Democrat questioning a Democrat appointee like that, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Nor have I. And just a few minutes ago, Representative Ro Khanna just demanded the resignation of Kimberly Cheatle. So, I haven't seen that before either. And I just want to point out that that gunman had been identified 26 minutes prior outside the fence. They already had identified him as a suspicious character. And for her to say that 5-10 degree grade on the roof was the reason that they didn't clear the roof, or they didn't even clear the building. I mean, it's a huge, colossal breakdown. And I could not believe that people were in the immediate aftermath, giving credit to the Secret Service, saying what a great job they did, because what looked like to me was a major breakdown from.
I understand why Trump. I understand why Trump and the Trump family were trying to be gracious to the agents. Some of them have been with him a long time, but everybody, from Dan Bongino, who worked with the Secret Service and is the biggest Trump ally on the planet, on down, there was unanimous consent that this was an absolute abysmal failure. Scott, how in the world does this woman still have a job? Why was she not testifying earlier as the former head of the Secret Service? To me, this is unacceptable.
It truly is. Maybe I come from a different generation, but, in the Navy, where I served for 28 years, if you scraped a buoy, you were relieved of command immediately. And this is a little more serious than scraping a buoy on a destroyer. So the lack of accountability and more important, the arrogance of these people, that they don't even have the morality to resign in absolute disgrace. I cannot tell you how this makes me feel. If I were a congressman, I literally would be throwing things around in front of this woman, because I have all my life seen men and women in the military and the intelligence community be accountable for their actions, because without accountability, you do not have a functioning organization. And the fact that this woman can talk to Congress like this, I would immediately put her in contempt of Congress, if not arrest her outright with the powers that are given to Congress.
You make a great point. I mean, if a member of the Secret Service left their gun in their vehicle and the car was broken into, they would be facing firing. They would be facing losing a ton of vacation days. They would have a blemish on their jacket for the rest of their career. But if you're the director, appointed by a Democratic administration, well, apparently it doesn't matter if your failures got a man killed, almost a former president killed, got other people shot, people injured. It's absolutely abysmal what we're seeing. Well, it's been great to be with you. Thank you very much to Jenna and the team for letting me sit in and host. Jenna's going to be back with you again. Always great to be hosting here. Until next time, thanks for watching.